Now, if anyone wanted to keep kicking it on South Beach, it was Marcell Ozuna, who turned back the clock to 2020 in Miami. And then there was Kyle Wright landing on the IL for the second time in a little more than a month, and Ronald Acuna Jr. and Michael Harris II putting a scare into Braves country. Welcome into BPTV, Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you. And Grant, sweep aside, everyone not named Marcell Ozuna was probably happy to leave Lone Depot Park behind.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, the series was nothing if not eventful. And for the Braves, they handled business the way that they needed to. The offense did what was asked of it, and Marcell Ozuna was kind of right in the middle of that. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more. I think we saw some promising signs from somebody named Austin Riley, who had kind of gone missing a little bit. And when it comes to hard hit contact, so that was certainly good to see. A lot of other home runs were hitting that series, but you mentioned it, injuries. Hard to ignore those. Kyle Wright, that's definitely a disappointment. The fact that Michael Harris and Ronald Acuna Jr. only suffered minor injury scares is definitely a good thing. And now the club comes home and they get to face a very good Baltimore Orioles team. So all in all, it's been a productive road trip. The Braves 5-1 against two NL East foes, best road record in baseball, biggest divisional lead in all of baseball. They've got a few things going for them, and it may sound crazy to say, but they haven't gotten fully healthy, and they may not have really hit their stride yet, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, also the best record in the National League after that 5-1 road trip. So good feelings and bad, definitely all over the place. So let's start our conversation with Kyle Wright. Back on the IL with shoulder inflammation, he left Wednesday's start with no outs in the top of the third, having thrown just 55 pitches. MLB's wins leader a year ago, he, of course, started the IL with the start of the season on the IL with a shoulder injury. Wright's velocity on Wednesday went from 94.8 miles an hour in the first inning to 92.6 along the way before his exit. I'm, of course, not a doctor. I only play one on the internet, but compensation injuries do matter, and they do happen. This time, Wright says it's more in the back of his shoulder, but that popping up again after just 5 starts, Grant, feels a little more than just a tiny bit concerning.
Well, anytime you hear shoulder, I think you get more concerned. I mean, we know, obviously, history tells us if you have a major elbow injury, the surgery that you usually require for that, we know what the comeback is. But a lot of guys, when they start dealing with shoulder problems, if it becomes something that is major, maybe they never get back to being the pitcher that they were before. And I'm not saying that that's the case here, but that's why when you do hear recurrence of shoulder inflammation or pain or whatever it may be, you do start to get a little bit concerned. Hopefully the Braves were able to, and Rick Kranitz seemed to be very adamant when he got out to the mound that they needed to go ahead and go a different direction than having Kyle Wright out there. But getting Kyle out of that game, getting him on the injured list, maybe giving him time to calm that down. I don't know if it would be time for another one of those injections or something that would help him in therapeutic value to get back in, get some treatment. But hopefully that's the case. And hopefully we haven't seen the last of Kyle Wright for the not too distant future. Maybe just another stint on the injured list as a precautionary thing is something that the Braves will be able to get through this issue with him or help Kyle get through this issue. But this was about the time that the Braves rotation really started, Corey, to look like it was getting healthy and becoming really productive because you have Max Fried back doing his thing. Spencer Strider's off to a great start. I think Charlie Morton has shown some progress. Clearly, Bryce Elder's been a big story in stabilizing the back end of the rotation, but you needed Kyle Wright back in there. I've felt like, and I've said this time and again, he was kind of the glue in the rotation a year ago. Not just the 21 wins, but every fifth day, you could pretty much count on this guy to go out there and give you 6 or 7 really quality innings.
Yeah, Dylan Dodd, he brought up in Wright's place. He allowed 3 runs on 8 hits and 3 walks over 6 innings against the Marlins. That swing and miss just wasn't there. 15% over his 85 pitches. But I will say the man absolutely throws strikes. He was at 62% first pitch rate in that start, better than the MLB average of 60.6. Obviously, as you mentioned, the hope is going to be that Wright is back and doesn't have another long-term issue. But we know that Michael Soroka is lurking in AAA. Jared Schuster could get another shot. You mentioned the work of Bryce Elder, a 1.75 ERA through 6 starts. The Braves are second in the NL in starter F4. They are still in an enviable position with this rotation, even as things work themselves out.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think about that. And clearly, when you've got Max Fried, who did miss a couple of weeks, but has pitched exactly like you expect Max Fried to pitch otherwise. Spencer Strider's really good start. Again, I think Charlie Morton's been serviceable at the very least. And if that's kind of what you're going to get out of him, maybe he finds another gear. I mean, he's done it before. That's great. But again, it's just hard to, I guess, overstate the loss of Wright as something that could take the stability out of the rotation. But Bryce Elder is somebody who came in and brought some stability that maybe you didn't expect out of that 5th spot. You certainly hoped for it. And based on the candidates that the Braves came into spring training with, Michael Soroka among them, you were kind of thinking this is a group that's got depth, they've got talent, they're going to be a strength for this club. And to your point, with that F4, they have been a strength for this club. But as you see these injuries and some of the innings and some of the tax that's put on the bullpen to cover when you do have injuries and when you do have to figure out how to get through 4, 5, or 6 innings in a start, that can certainly add up. So the Braves want to be able to get somebody locked in there, though they won't really need the 5th starter that much over the next week and a half. So we'll see if it's Dylan Dodd or somebody else as the Braves move forward through the month of May with a bunch of off days, whatever those are, after they get done with the Baltimore Orioles. It will be an interesting decision for Atlanta, but obviously the best case scenario was having a healthy Kyle Wright, and we'll see exactly when they'll be able to check that box again and get him back in there.
So let's talk about signs of life offensively. You mentioned it with Austin Riley. Marcell Ozuna arrived in Miami, his old stomping grounds, where he was a 2-time All-Star Gold Glove winner, and he absolutely went off. Yeah. He came in with 5 hits and 2 home runs and 59 at-bats. That's a .85 batting average for those who don't want to do the math. Over the next 3 games, he proceeded to bash 3 home runs with 6 hits in all, 6 RBI, and a couple of walks. That's a .462 average and an OPS over 1,600 in that series. We all know the results haven't always been there, but a few things that jump out to him with him this season, I do want to point out. The exit velocity is his best since he led the NL in home runs and RBIs in 2020. So is the hard hit rate, the barrel rate, the walk rate. He may not keep producing like this, but those metrics, Grant, set Ozuna up for a breakout, and the Marlins are the ones that paid the price.
Well, they are. But I will say this. I mean, a couple of things that jump out to me is you bring up the walk rate. That was something when you looked at his 2022 stats, his walk rate absolutely cratered, the lowest of his entire career. I think it was hovering somewhere around 6%. And then there was all the swing and miss and the lack of hits. They just weren't coming. Even when he was hitting the ball hard, it wasn't necessarily resulting in hits. He was running into the occasional home run, but it just wasn't the all-around run producer and power bat that you were looking for, who could really affect the game and not just be the one-dimensional, once every 5 or 6 days, I'm going to hit a home run for you. That could be something that with those metrics mirroring 2020, although, again, we're still kind of in small sample size theater, has you encouraged that numbers or series like he just had against Miami? Maybe he's got a few more of those up his sleeve. I know from talking to folks around the team that he has continued to work extremely hard. I got to the ballpark early before the last series when the Braves were heading out on the road, and Marcell Ozuna was out on the field at 3 p.m. taking early batting practice. And, you know, to a man, there haven't been too many teammates or any teammates complaining about, you know, what he is in and around that team, but the results flat out haven't been there on the field. And we're not just talking about 2023. Clearly, this has been a couple of years that has led up to all of this. So to, I think, quote you, if anybody couldn't afford to get off to the kind of start that Marcell Ozuna got off to, it was Marcell Ozuna. He had a lot of questions and I think put a lot of pressure on himself as well. So I know that he's had trouble on the field. I know that he's had trouble off the field. I know that he's a divisive character. I kind of refer to him now as the embattled slugger. But if he is able to put all of that stuff behind him and start producing just in the bottom third of the Braves order, how much more dangerous does this Atlanta club get if Marcell Ozuna has some series and some games like he had in Miami against some other clubs with a little bit more frequency? I'm encouraged he did one of them against Sandy Alcantara. Clearly a grand slam amongst a 2 home run game, knocking in 5 runs, helping the Braves blow out the Marlins. That was good to see, but I was encouraged by the walks to bring it all the way back around. If he's able to take his base and just keep that line moving, as the Braves like to say, that makes Marcell Ozuna a more valuable piece and a more dangerous piece to the Braves lineup, even if he is not being asked to hit in the middle of the order, which many, if not most of us, thought that he would be when he signed his extension before 2021.
Yeah, and it certainly helps too, the top of that order, when you think about Austin Riley and what he was able to do of late. Certainly some signs of life from him. I know we saw him a year ago kind of have his lull, and then things simply took off for him. This could be the signs of absolutely the same thing coming from the third baseman. Yeah,
and he's a hard worker. I don't know that anybody I've seen that I've covered from the minor league levels all the way up has done more work, whether it was, hey, I know that defensively I've got to figure some things out at third base with my footwork and, you know, commit to that. I know I don't like the way that my body is sliding in these pitches. I'm going to change some things about my stance. He continues to find ways to refine and improve things. And I think Jeff Francoeur brought this up on the broadcast on the TV side over the Marlins series. You know, we don't like it to be instantaneous change that fixes the problems that you might be feeling at the plate, but it takes a little while to get that adjustment for things to really sink in. But I felt like with the lift that we were seeing in that Marlins series, particularly, I mean, the big time home run that he hit, some fly balls that I felt like he was really starting to strike the ball well, approach it with the right launch angle. Those are encouraging things, because I was crunching some numbers and inside the StatCast data for Austin, and it was just confounding. I spent probably 15 minutes looking through this, trying to figure out, okay, well, how did he go from this in 2021 and 2022 to this that we're seeing in 2023? And among all of those things was the fact that his launch angle was about 50% lower than it was last year. I think it was something around 12 to 13% launch angle in 2022, down around 6.5 to 7% on the average here early in the year. So that would explain a lot of ground balls. He's also getting beat by fastballs a lot. That had not been a trait of Austin Riley over the last couple of years. If anything, he pulverized fastballs and he started punishing people with breaking balls as well in his breakout season of 2021, and then following it up last year with a torrid hot streak amidst what was another big season for him. So to your point, I do think that Austin Riley is capable of making those adjustments, continuing to work hard, and finding his way back to the 30-plus homer, 100 RBI, 275 to maybe 300 batting average if he gets really hot, and piling up those extra base hits and doing exactly what the Braves need to be done in the third spot of the order.
Well, we now turn our attention to the American League portion of the Braves schedule. They'll have a whopping 14 straight games against the American League thanks to MLB's new scheduling format. Suffice to say, that has never happened before. It starts with a 5-game homestand against the AL East with 3 with the Orioles, followed by 2 against the Red Sox. My focus on this series is going to be behind the plate, Grant, because we've got Sean Murphy, the majors F4 leader at 2.1, Adley Rutschman, who's 3rd in the F4 among all catchers. I really think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better showcase of 20-something backstops all season long than what we're going to see over the next 3 games at Truist Park.
No, I'd agree with that. I'm excited to get to the ballpark and get to see Adley Rutschman. And honestly, this is an Orioles club that they really surprised baseball last year. But instead of coming back in 2023 and just kind of falling back into the pack and being 7, 8, 9 games under 500 again and being, quote unquote, the same old Orioles, they're kind of showing that last year was no fluke, and they're looking to do some winning in what is perennially a very tough division to do some winning in. So I'm excited to get a look at a club that we haven't seen very much. That's one thing that this schedule will allow us to do in 2023 and beyond, is see clubs that we haven't necessarily gotten to even have the opportunity to see come into Truist Park. And the Orioles, I know, have been in and out because of their AL East ties, but this is a better Orioles club than last time they rolled through Atlanta. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. And what can you say about Sean Murphy other than he's been better than advertised? He continues to produce behind the plate with that arm and, of course, at the plate. He is having a breakout season offensively. I think he's on pace for 40 home runs, for over 100 runs knocked in. If he plays anywhere close to the 148 games, I believe he was in for Oakland a year ago, this is a guy that may be seeing his career really take off in Atlanta, and it's going to look like a genius stroke for Alex Anthopoulos in making a trade that many people wondered, why are you messing with catcher? We're pretty set there. Well, Sean Murphy, I think, is going to come in and kind of change that paradigm.
Yeah, for all the focus on, okay, shortstop, and then watching Dansby Swanson walk, this could end up being the deftest move that anybody made this offseason in getting Sean Murphy in a Braves uniform. The pitching matchups against the Orioles is going to be Max Fried on Friday against Dean Kremer, Saturday at Spencer Strider against Kyle Brandis, followed Sunday with Bryce Elder and Tyler Wells. Unfamiliarity is going to be the key storyline here. Fried has a 139 average against the current Orioles. But only James McCann has ever seen Strider or Elder, so that could play to the Braves' advantage. But this figures to be a compelling series. You mentioned it, the Orioles, they've been building towards something. They just missed out on a wild card spot a year ago. Now they're 2nd in the AL and wins behind the Rays, so figures to be a ton of fun this weekend at Truist Park. Don't forget, we've always got you covered here on BPTV, so be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell a friend as we keep this community growing. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.